Hello, my name is Rashawn Clayton, organizing specialist for the AFL-CIO for Maricopa County.
Hi, I'm Ryan Kelly. I'm the organizing specialist for the Arizona AFL-CIO in Southern Arizona, so mostly Pima County.
Hello, I am Esau Gutierrez. I am the training specialist for the Arizona AFL-CIO statewide.
Hi, I'm Fred Yamashita, Executive Director of the Arizona AFL-CIO.
Hello, and welcome to the Off the Cuff Labor Podcast month. There's a lot going on in labor right now. There's a lot of things that the Arizona AFL is ready to work with and provide for the state. First, after our introductions, we're just going to highlight our first guest for the podcast is going to be Fred Yamashita. So he's our executive director here at the Arizona AFL-CIO. Fred, do you want to introduce yourself, kind of just talk about yourself a little bit so that folks know a little bit more about you?
Sure, thanks, Esau. So my union career started a long time ago in Detroit, Michigan. That's where I was born and raised. My first union job was with a company called Clipper International. I made axle housings there in Detroit, Michigan, and I belonged to the Machinist Union. One of my first wildcat strike there, at least that's how the company characterized it, was called back to work, paid back pay for the 3 days we were off because of working conditions that were taking place in the plant. But then I moved to Los Angeles. I actually went on the leave of absence from that job and ended up staying in Los Angeles and getting a job as a box boy in 1978 for the then Retail Clerks Union, working for Hughes Market in Los Angeles. And we were actually in the middle of a major merger at that time. The Retail Clerks Union was in the process of merging with one of the most powerful unions in the country at that time, the Amalgamated Meat Cutters. And that merger was completed in 1979. And I worked in the grocery industry for several years there. I did other things in Los Angeles. I ran billiard rooms. But ended up going back into grocery and moving to Arizona in 1992, working for Albertsons at 51st Avenue and Cactus here in Phoenix. But I didn't realize that Albertsons wasn't union here in Arizona. And so I put applications in with some of the union stores, Fry's, APCO, and Smith's. Ended up getting hired by Smith's, worked out in Sun City. And that's where I got involved with the UFCW local here in Phoenix, UFCW Local 99. I joined back in 92, 94 when I started working for Smith's, and got involved with the union at that store, and eventually worked with the union to do sign up membership recruitment for the local to help grow the union, and then got hired by the union in 1996, and I worked there for over 20 years. During that time, I was living and working in Tucson, Arizona for 4 years. That's where I met Ryan, and I got active politically and with the community and with the Pima Area Labor Federation. And in 2016, I became the chair of the Pima Area Labor Federation. I was active, of course, with the AFL-CIO at that point. And in 2017, was given an opportunity to move back to Phoenix as the executive director for the Arizona AFL-CIO. And I've been here since 2017, November.
All right. That's a I don't know how you feel about what I'm about to say, but that's a long and storied track record. First off, the thing I want to ask you is you mentioned being a union member and then stepping up. There's you went through a couple of mergers. You went through a couple of events that shaped the unions that you were in. What's one that sticks out to you? What's one time in history where you were considered you would consider yourself an aware union member, where things changed?
Yeah, I think the first experience was what I talked about, was the first Wildcat strike.
Okay.
So the company called it.
Yes.
And
And if the company calls it that, that's what it is, right?
yeah, and so a few of us, after being let go by the company for refusing to work because of working conditions, we went down to the Machinist Hall downtown Detroit, and we filed a grievance, and we prevailed, and that's why we were recalled back to work with and made whole, full back pay, given our seniority back. And then the second major experience was right after I started working for Hughes Market in Los Angeles, and then in 1979, not only was the merger going on, but we were in industry negotiations at that time with the national grocery companies. And the company I worked for was a smaller union company in Los Angeles called Hughes Market. They were on a sweetheart agreement, which means that they accepted whatever the major industries negotiated with the unions. But we still got to participate in the process. And we went to the Los Angeles Sports Arena to take a strike vote. And there were over 7,000 union members at the Los Angeles Sports Arena.
For a strike vote, that's
For a strike vote. And my co-worker and I, we were loading picket signs into the back of his pickup truck. Even though we weren't on strike at our company, we took that strike vote. There was a strike for 3 days. We picketed with Ralph's employees at that time. But just being in that environment of 7,000 union members, you were ready to do whatever it took. You were inspired. I was inspired. And so I would say that's the second experience that really motivated me and shaped me as a union person. I think the third was after working, leaving the industry for 8 years and working and running pool rooms and in and around the Los Angeles area, I went back into the grocery industry where I had all new seniority again. I didn't have any seniority, and I was working for Albertsons in California and got laid off when hours got short. And so I had an opportunity to transfer to Arizona with Albertsons, and I took that because I could get hours, but I didn't know that they weren't union here in Arizona. So I was doing the same work for the same company, making about $4.50 an hour less because we weren't union.
Man.
Was working in a right to work state for the first time, having been born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, and moving to Los Angeles. That wasn't my experience with those states, even though Michigan did go right to work many years later. But of course, they repealed that again. But being in Arizona and being faced with the wages, the way workers were treated, and this really what many consider non-union environment, it definitely wasn't a worker-friendly environment. I had 5 kids already. I had a family to feed, and I had made a determination, and I never really was one person to do this, to have those serious conversations with yourself. But I did at this time. I said, you could complain about your situation, but that's not going to help you. That's not going to change anything.
Yeah.
That's not going to help anybody. And at that time, I made a conscious decision to get active with the union, because that's the only way I thought that we would be able to change things in Arizona. And so I became a union steward at Smith's, working in Sun City for UFCW Local 99, and then just got active from there. And I think that's the third and probably the most important experience I had that shaped my union experience.
It's almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like there was a trigger, right? When you think about your family and those dependent on you, it's almost like beyond being, and not that there's anything wrong with it, but beyond that being just a dues paying member, right? You kind of want to take matters into your own hand and do what you can to push your union forward. I mean, you mentioned the wage difference between a union and a non-union work job. A whole $4 difference is pretty massive.
Yeah.
And well, you know, today, but like even right in the time period, it's a big difference to see that unions really set the floor for every industry. Rashawn and Ryan, do you guys want to talk about maybe the differences you've seen organizing around Arizona when it comes to the difference between union and non-union labor?
I mean, the landscape in Arizona is changing right now. You got more people want to be unionized, when people they're not taking it and working their managers, bosses, and they're not gonna take up mistreatment and being underpaid and mistreated, like a double negative. So they want to fight back. So, and then this is an opportunity. It's a good time right now, especially with the young laborers, Starbucks, you know, Amazon workers, standing up and making a voice for themselves.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, and I think I would add to it too. You know, I always say, because Arizona is a right to work state and has always been a right to work state, that the folks who are in the movement down here, we may be few, but we're mighty. Like the union members you'll meet in Arizona, they mean it, they live it, they breathe it, you know, and that's something special. And it's an unfortunate, it's a powerful bright byproduct, right, of an unfortunate political climate, right? But that is changing, right? And I think that you know, whether it's automation in the workplace, or especially in a heavy service economy, and what we saw all of those workers go through in COVID, you know, everybody sees it, union or not, they see that the table is being reset and people want a seat at that table. And that's where we come in, right?
There's the conversation about right to work, and Fred, you talked about this kind of journey that Michigan has gone through, being a union state, famously, right, historically a union state. We're talking about the auto industry, we're talking about production, and then Michigan kind of, you know, took an unfortunate political hit, you know, with I'm gonna make an educated guess here and say it was like the Reaganomics era that kind of led to right to work in Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can attribute some of those factors to what happened. And I think the political process, of course, the political landscape changed in Michigan. At that time, you know, Governor Snyder, and during his campaign, had said over and over again that he had no interest in right to work. But as soon as they got the super majority in the state, they got that bill on his desk and he signed it. And then it just led, you know, into several years of, I say decline, but a decline in attitude more than a decline in membership.
Okay.
I think one of the things we learned about Janus and a similar experience in Michigan, like there wasn't this mass exodus of union members. I think the unions worked hard to maintain and educate their members, and I think to a certain degree had a lot of success in that. And so they were primed to overturn right to work when they turned the political tables in Michigan.
Yeah.
And had a governor that was willing to do away with the right to work law again.
To take on that fight. I mean, Michigan had a perfect storm, right? It was going back just to make sure I say the full statement. Michigan was a historically famous pro-labor state, and then, you know, whether or not it was that area, that time period of Reaganomics or conservative rise in Michigan, right to work took place. And now Michigan, with what, I don't know if you guys would agree, there's a bit of a progressive or pro-union, right? Like sentiment going on nationwide. I think you've mentioned a couple of times how pro-union sentiment is in the country's at its highest point in half a century, maybe more. It's something like 69% of Americans are supportive of labor unions.
Yeah, I think there's a pro-union sentiment, and I think it's a sentiment that hasn't gone away for a lot of families, a lot of working families, and that's evidenced by the state of Missouri back in 2018. They fought back right to work with union members.
Yeah.
Even though Missouri is considered a red state, they work with union members. They work with community organizations. They work with the constituency groups of the AFL-CIO to overturn that right to work law. And then more recently in Montana, they fought back right to work, working with Republicans in the state legislature.
Yeah.
Because it is generally the pro-union sentiment that prevails. It prevailed in Missouri, prevailed in Montana, and ultimately prevailed again in Michigan. And so I think politics can play a big part in it, and it does play a big part in that. But also where there's a union presence, that could be the determining factor.
Yeah, I completely agree. And honestly, it's something to be thankful about, that unions are able to understand, and we'll talk more about this later on, because we did want to spend some time talking about organizing and what it's like to recruit new members into their respective unions. But just another topic that I wanted to touch on real quick was speaking of Michigan and their journey away from their journey towards right to work and then back away from right to work. There was a story in the news a couple of weeks back that I wanted to make sure to highlight, which was, we all know what's currently going on with the Republican candidates for president there. I think like this week is their first debate.
I want to say the 25th, I believe.
On the 25th. And so the Republican candidates are kind of on their spotlight right now, but one of the key candidates not named Donald Trump is Ron DeSantis. And in the state of Florida, he's been doing these like test tube experiments for like conservative audiences, which one was, he changed it so that the teachers union in Florida can no longer automatically deduct dues from payroll. It needs to be individually done by each member. This was meant as an attack to, for lack of a better word, right? To like, yeah, it's union busting. Yeah, I can't think off the top of my head any state in the country where the teachers union don't have their dues automatically deducted from their pay. It's a streamlined process that makes everybody's life easier. And in Florida, Ron DeSantis passed this law that effectively shuts that down. The teachers union in Florida was able to preempt this move, and they actually grew in membership by thousands after this took effect. So, I mean, that's something that I wanted to kind of talk about with you guys, Rashawn and Ryan. How do you feel unions out there right now? And this is with a broad stroke, unions. How do you feel unions right now are thinking about, challenges to membership, recruitment? It's a broad question, but how do you see growth taking place in the next 2 years for unions?
I mean, looking at the state of Florida, economically, they're suffering right now due to the decision of Ron DeSantis. And that's something that you could organize around, because basically we want good paying jobs and respect at workplace. And people don't want to work in a place where they're not getting paid properly. So that's a great way to organize that. They're attacking that like poke the bear, like, look, aren't you tired of this? And like make them do something. This all about organizing, is having to ask. How you get to the ask is, people have multiple ways of doing it. I'm an agitator, so I would agitate people to like, hey, this is not right. No, it don't matter, what side of the coin you're on. what your political, at the end of the day, it's about economic growth for you and your family. And that's that connection that you can start right there and build from that.
You said the magic word, which is being ready for an ask, right? In Florida, I think that's where not that I was on the ground, right? So I don't know their magic formula, but in Florida they were able to prepare with that ask, right? To go to the membership and say, the governor is getting rid of your union's funding, right? Effectively, your governor is trying to seize the funding for your union. And so what is the ask to a teacher in Florida? Is education tough right now? What do you want to do about it? Is your pay proper right now? What do you want to do about it? Are you properly staffed? What do you want to do about it? Who's going to do this for you? It's you and your union.
I mean, Fred tells a story one time in his office about upping the union dues to help combat things that was
Walmart.
going on, like campaigns. You want to speak on that real quick about that? Like, I think that's a good tool to use, but maybe to show that not only we proud to pay our dues, let's up it up a little bit so we can combat this injustice.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I mean, I know that there are obviously different ways to organize workers, and I think what Sean was referring to was a program that a former UFCW Local 99 president ran while we were combating the Walmart corporation, because Walmart has been the leader in the industry of driving down wages and benefits and rights in the industry. And so during this time when, and understanding that anything that a union does, any union, it only happens because of the hard working union members that pay dues, members that contribute to the PAC funds, and members that finance other activity. And in this case, the president of the local did a statewide campaign, went around and spoke to all of the members. At that time, we may have been about 16,000, 17,000 members here in the state of Arizona, and talked to them about the biggest threat to their job, which was Walmart.
Yeah.
And would they be willing to invest in fighting to protect their own livelihood? And they overwhelmingly said yes. And they voted to pay an increase in dues, double to be exact,
which is tough to communicate.
For a year. In which time, after a year, their dues went back to the normal rates. But I think this is a testament to the worker, that they understood what the union represented to them, that the reason they were union members was to have a voice in the workplace. Part of the reason they wanted a voice was to be able to protect their jobs. And that meant in market share as well. And Walmart would take up a big percentage of the market share, and it undermines the abilities for those companies to stay competitive. Those union members understood that. So not only were they protecting their own jobs and their own families, they were also protecting the companies that they worked for.
Yeah.
And so that was, I think, a tremendous testament to not just the leadership of the union, but to the union members themselves.
You mentioned earlier going to a 7,000 person strike vote. And then now you're mentioning overwhelming support for raising your own dues to fight this giant monster, right? We all understand now kind of hopefully I'm right in saying that we might be currently living in the aftermath of Walmart. The more damage could still be done, right? But you don't see small businesses around a Walmart, right? A Walmart drops on your zip code. It's almost fair to say good game to like mom and pop shops. Anything, within a 5-mile radius around a Walmart is just not going to be competitive. So when union members in this specific instance saw the danger communicated by their union and said, hey, help us fight Walmart, it was overwhelming. They said yes.
Absolutely, absolutely they did. And you know, I think one of the things that we've learned as young people, when they still used to teach us things in school, was that history repeats itself. You know, especially if you took economics at any point in your education, you learn that there's these cycles, these economic cycles that would happen in a capitalist society. And you know, I would suggest that that the cycle has been skewed for working people,
Okay.
right? That history, we should stop looking for that magical repetition of labor strength and solidarity as it happened in the 30s, right? That those opportunities don't exist anymore. And we, as labor and organized labor and as workers, we really have to think, and for lack of a better term, I know this is cliche, but we really have to think outside of the box if we are going to continue to organize workers and capitalize on the popularity of unions right now. We have to stop marginalizing young people and young workers. They are not a category. They are the labor movement right now. And so if we don't share our experiences, you know, then we're doing a disservice and an injustice to workers that want to organize and have a union right now. And I just feel like these opportunities, it's the new cycle. We have to create our own history right now. We really do.
I agree. I just want to give a swig for the dues paying members and all the organizers out there.
Yeah.
I just trust the APRR. Sports ball.
This
is what-
interlude brought to
yeah.
you by-
Just wanted, you know, that was, hey, well said, Fred. So let's go back to Detroit. You know, Detroit, Uniontown. Even the sports teams speak working class, hard working, from the Pistons, the Flyers, the Tigers and stuff like that. So you grew up in Detroit. Was you around a lot of union members as a kid? And you did you go to union meetings, or anybody in your family was a union?
And so first I'm going to correct you, like the Flyers,
Oh,
the
sorry.
Philadelphia.
I heard
You know,
I'll feel that slide.
let's get, no, you don't let
I, I didn't even catch it, to be honest.
That's show you how much I know about hockey.
Yeah, but yes, yeah, Rashawn. I mean, look, I always joked, like, you know, when you're born in Detroit, Michigan, you're born a Democrat and a union member, and not necessarily in that order. And it's not that I went to union meetings, but you know, I lived surrounded by union factories.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, everywhere I went was unions. And so there's a certain, I think, a certain danger in being so inundated by unions that you may risk taking it for granted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so I think when those recessions that we suffered in the 70s, and definitely in the 80s, and I was already in Los Angeles in the 80s, but in the 70s, for sure, was a result of, I think, the complacency, the complacency of workers to just allow and assume that every union was going to have their best interest at heart. And I'm not gonna bash unions, because I'm union through and through. But I do want to just offer.
Says the executive director of the AFL-CIO.
Yeah, look, we're not perfect, right? Unions aren't perfect. And you know, in Detroit, there's this thing called planned obsolescence.
Yeah.
You know, our roads are bad, You drove your cars on those roads every day. We use salt on the highways. Those things were directly designed to ruin your car. So that in 3 to 4 years, you were gonna have to buy a new car. Instead of using the knowledge and the technology that we had to create a better quality product, we went along to play along. And so when my neighborhood, Pole Town in Detroit, we didn't call it Pole Town back then, but when we were displaced by the GM world headquarters, they literally tore down and built over a plant, the Dodge main assembly plant, that housed 30,000 workers. And I understand they had to automate. But what they did was they tore the heart of the city out.
Yeah.
They just tore it out and displaced the whole community. So I think there was a lack of foresight, a lack of compassion that unions should have fought harder for, that unions should have utilized more of, and protected workers more. And workers, as workers, as union members, we should have been more proactive in our unions.
And I think some credit is due in the modern labor movement. Definitely with still some faults, but I can't say that I've seen a major campaign or a major labor struggle in the last, I'll say 20, and I'll make this recent. I think maybe since 2012, 2013. I don't think I've seen a major labor movement that fails to take into account the communities affected, that takes into account the long-term stability of membership. There's a couple of campaigns that I've seen personally, right, where whether it's organizing against decertification at the Circus in Reno. When we talk to members to see what they thought of the situation, we heard multiple times with the employees at the Circus in Reno that their communities are just gone. I'm going to say Reno a million times, but I talked to a elderly woman who was working. I want to say she was working in the casinos. They have multiple food stalls, and she would work whichever one needed her that day. And she was north of 70 years old, still working in the casino. And she mentioned how there used to be in just food service in the casino, 100 people a day, right? Working, feeding the clientele. And now it was like one person per stall. So there was 5 people on any given Thursday, Friday. And so when the union goes to negotiate with the casinos, it's really talking about, are we understaffed? Are we paying these people to live in their communities anymore? Because housing was getting out of whack in Reno. But that's just one example. I was wondering if you guys have any examples of modern day campaigns that look forward to protect their communities.
I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn, especially because we have a very prominent Arizona UFCW person, but Fred knows that I referred back to the Smithfield organizing campaign that UFCW did, and then did again, and finally succeeded. And the tactics that had to be undertaken to protect community there, because obviously Smithfield is the largest ham products, factory distributor in the country, and the population that was working inside of their slaughterhouses, their warehouses, were predominantly migrant communities, and where they weren't migrant, they were African American communities. So we're talking about significantly marginalized people in the community. And I remember hearing stories and talking with you about it, that UFCW actually had to stand up to immigration
Wow.
because they were called in as a tactic to union bust and to ruin organizing efforts in that drive. So that's something that I think of often. And I think part of that reason is obviously living in Arizona. We're a border state, and we often tell people, in our unions, like, to get a union card, you don't need, it doesn't matter if you're a citizen or not. If you're a worker, your odds are you're eligible, right? And we want you in the union. And so you fight for everybody. And that holistic nature, I think, is that's part of what attracts me to labor organizing, period. It's that mentality. And I think that's where Arizona, that's when we start taking the next step and going somewhere we haven't seen.
I think you touched on a great quality of labor. I'm not going to say it's a modern trait, because I think that this could have been part of it the whole time. But labor organizing and labor struggles aren't one dimensional, right? It's there's everything in it, right? Whether it's matters of race, whether it's matters of class, of social structure, whether it's matters of environmental quality. I mean, we talk about recently, right, in East Palestine, with the overturned rail cart. There was talks about, like, I think it was grocery store workers that were in the community. They didn't want to. They were scared to go to work. They were scared to breathe in the air, and labor organizers were able to raise these concerns with management. So I mean, labor is not by any means a one-dimensional issue.
Yeah. I got people who I talk to. It's not even about the pay sometimes with them. It was really
There you
about
go.
the respect on the job. And I was thrown away because first thing you hear when you organize, I want better pay, better benefits. But now lately people are like, hey, I don't want respect on the job, so I'm a human being. I'm a human. First and foremost, I'm somebody's son, daughter, I'm a father, mother. I want to be treated with a certain amount of respect, and I want it in the country that you get respect, and you just can't talk to me any kind of way. Secondly, people's safety. I mean, I can't believe it's 2023. We still to my safety on the job. People just want to be safe at work. They want to be able to come to work and make an income and return the same way they came, safe.
Especially right now, there's so many states that are cutting back on, like, safety precautions and
Child
And you
labor.
think about yeah. When you talk about rail raise, what I'm saying, and you think about how much cuts the previous administration did in the infrastructure, and now the new administration is currently in trying to fix that with the infrastructure bill and stuff like that. So safety is a key and is a concern. What I'm saying, because you don't expect it happens, but you don't think the last place you think you'll perish is at the work site. That's horrible. So you want to put things in place, and that's why I love about being a part of a union, because you have a say in it.
Yeah.
Non-union people have to just suffer, and it's sad, but they're not trying to suffer anymore because they're organized, and that's a beautiful part about what we're going through right now in this time. So
there's I don't know how you guys feel about the Starbucks conversation. I feel like every time that there's a discussion at length about labor, to me, I think it'd be a disservice not to mention what's going on with Starbucks, because it's to what Fred was talking about earlier, which is it's a mix of young workers, it's a mix of many demographics, particularly LGBTQIA plus demographics. We're also talking about management. We're talking about health benefits. The Starbucks campaign right now, to me, is a little microcosm of everything that labor.
And don't forget about retired workers who had to go back to work because prescriptions are cost and they're cutting on their Social Security, so they can't afford to live off the means they work all their life. They can't afford to live off what they've been given, so they have to go back to work. And Starbucks seems like an easy job. Think about having some,
which, by the way,
young manager just belittling somebody who's already worked their whole life, raised a family, Only way I had to go back because life is hard right now.
Yeah.
Things are so high. I have to take a job at Starbucks because it's paid enough so I won't lose my benefit, but it also help me buy prescription drugs or even just food or the bare necessity that they need every day.
There's a clip going out around there out there on the internet where a podcaster was mentioning that he was talking to somebody of a conservative mindset about how Starbucks is considered like a teenage high school summer job, right? Completely untrue. But this person was telling him, yeah, it's a job, but you shouldn't expect to be able to live off of it. And the question then gets asked, well, do you want coffee? And the person says, yeah, I want coffee. Like, well, so you think this job should exist? Yes. So if you want this job to exist, why do these people not deserve to pay their rent? Why do these people not deserve to be able to feed their families, to enjoy some form of leisure? Working at Starbucks, any form of job adjacent shouldn't be considered a punishment. You're literally working for a living. And so we depend on these baristas, there's also the saying, right? All work is skilled labor. All labor has dignity. If Starbucks disappeared off the face of the earth tonight, tomorrow we'd all be talking about it, right? Because what's going on? People want their coffee, people want their morning jolt, their lunch snack.
You see no lines at Starbucks?
What
People say about their coffee, man.
if those lines bleed into the street, then there's something going on.
Get a riot on our hands.
Yeah,
I think you're touching on something that's really powerful, and it's an interconnected thread too, right?
Yeah.
The labor movement at large, we don't believe in second tier workers.
There
right?
you go.
What was a big piece of the, we'll see, it's that the TA has to be voted on by Teamsters across the country. But what was a big piece of their negotiating a stronghold was we are getting rid of this tiered system, right? And when in 2016, right, we passed the minimum wage law at the state level here. What did Republicans do in our state from that moment on? They tried to create tiered systems. They actually said, if you're under this age or you're a student worker, we want to make your minimum wage less than everybody else.
Yeah.
And we fought back on that, and we were successful in that fight. And so, Ron DeSantis, let's loop it right back to the beginning of the
golden child,
conversation, right? He likes to brand himself as the conservative alternative to Trump. Well, when you're messing with dues payment structures, he stole that from Trump. Trump did that to federal workers when he was president in the 2019 shutdown. I remember talking to AFGE locals saying, like, we have to move to an e-dues paying system, and we have to go find everybody, and how complicated it was. And so, the three words that everybody in labor knows, right, is educate, agitate, organize. Well, sometimes the agitation comes from the outside and we respond. And what we're seeing right now, like, I think I want to believe it's a cultural shift that's bigger than labor, right?
Same.
And I think that we're responding to the agitation of the opposition, and we're responding pretty well, if I do say so myself.
I think we are. I think we as in labor. It's actually this is a good question for Fred. How do you see how do you see what Ryan just mentioned? Do you think that there's a bit of a cultural changing of the winds, or if that's even the right analogy? Do you think that there's a bit of a cultural change, or do you think it's purely like labor fighting for these changes that we're seeing in social perception of labor?
I think there is a cultural change. I think in our last State Federation Central Labor Council meeting with President Schuler, she talked about the recent polls in which the popularity of unions with the general public has gone up from an all-time high. So albeit 1%, it didn't go down. It went up.
It's kind of crazy when you think about 1% in this country is like 10 million people,
It's
right?
a lot of people, right? And so I think that is a reflection on the attitude of the culture and the attitude of workers in general, society in general. I just want to give a little bit of an anecdote in regards to the minimum wage bill that Ryan was talking about a little while ago in 2016 here in Arizona. And right before that, SCIU, one of the service employee unions, they have been embarking on a Fight for 15 campaign for several years, right? And the restaurant associations, of course, they're notorious for spending millions and millions of dollars fighting rather than just paying people what they deserve. They rather spend that money fighting to keep them from making the money that they deserve. And so, it was going to put the restaurant business, industry out of business. It was going to put McDonald's out of business. And if you look today at the ads, even if you went to a McDonald's to buy something to eat, their ads are offering above $15 an hour to start. The fact is that for people that used to argue that someone shouldn't make $15 an hour to flip a burger when teachers are only making X amount of dollars. Well, of course, that's an age-old argument, which is ass backwards.
Yeah.
Teachers have been drastically underpaid for decades.
True.
And should be making way more than what they're making. Paramedics should be making way more than what they're making. It's not someone at McDonald's making hamburgers and serving the public should be making less. There are many, many jobs today where those workers should be making much, much more. And the companies that employ them could afford to pay it, but they don't.
There's I'm just way too aware to a detriment about some like toxic cultures out there when it comes to labor. And well, I would label them as toxic. There's for especially myself growing up, in a Hispanic family, there's a bit of a expectation, right, that you're gonna work your butt off and you're gonna earn a living and you're gonna do it sorry, I kind of stuttered there. You're gonna do it to your own detriment, which translates into this culture. If you've ever seen videos out there of making fun of like what's the appropriate terminology, like oil drillers, what that's not blue collar, is it? Is it like blue collar?
Yeah, I would consider that blue
Yes.
collar.
So
Working on an oil rig.
an oil rig worker would say, like, oh, if you're not working 80 hours a week, eating through lunch, getting blood on your hands, you're not actually working, right? And that is a culture that's been nurtured, I want to say, by like conservative media, conservative talking heads, to kind of pit workers against each other. Because that person that is working on an oil rig and sacrificing time with their family, working to a detriment to their health, right, which they're still doing very important work, when they go home, they want to watch a movie, right? So there's artists that are facilitating his leisure. When that person goes home, he wants to eat some homemade food. So therefore, the grocery workers that he relies on are also doing work that's important to him. When that person goes home and there's running water for him to water his lawn, there's city workers that did work that he's dependent on. So whenever there's a toxic mindset about the work that you do being superior or being better than other work, it's important to try to, like, I don't know, nip it in the bud. It would be appropriate to let them know, like, hey, your work is really important and your work is pivotal to the life that we live, but so is everybody else's. Because that Starbucks barista keeps gets your daughter her coffee on the way to college, right? That burger flipper at McDonald's gets your son their lunch, so it's there's a really big need, in my opinion, to have folks have a healthy discussion of their work, instead of a toxic like you versus me.
Kind of gave me Lion King vibes right there when Mufasa took Simba to the top of Pride Rock, and telling him about how the antelopes and the grass and everything is a circle of life. Like it's also, so I just want to bring it down. Everyone else been here. Yeah, it's a circle. We all connected from the antelopes to the grass to the lions that eat the antelopes. Because then
awesome.
the antelope eat the grass again. So it's a circle of life. So everything have a balance and a place in the labor world. See,
and then he looks over to the
shadow.
badlands of Amazon. He goes, "You must never go there."
That's good. Oh,
And which is not to demean Amazon workers.
ALU, we love you.
But if you do that, they'll be like, man, they say I'm a union member. I came in for Amazon. And that's tough. Like, because that 2 day, 1 day delivery, same day delivery is like those are the hyenas and stuff over there in Amazon. I'm over there and play in the dark area.
I don't know if I'm out of line when I say this. Ryan's, you guys are a lot smarter than I am. But in regards to capitalism,
Okay. The
if we don't
secret.
consider our labor as part of the capitalistic system, then we are shortchanging ourselves.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, whether it's the barista at Starbucks, or whether it's the regional director for distribution at Starbucks, what makes his job more important than the barista? Because if there were no baristas, he wouldn't have a job.
There won't be anything to distribute.
He wouldn't have a job.
I say at orientation, especially at AT&T. I mean, if you're not answering the phone for AT&T, taking that call, helping that customer out, I mean, there's no manager. You're the face. That definition of frontline employees, right there. The person that you see. You don't see Stanky. You don't see Rosemary. You don't see none of the other execs there. You see Lakeisha, who answered his phone and trying to do her best to understand the bill that she didn't accumulate, and maybe both of y'all have a hard time understanding because bill is a little different. It's difficult to read sometimes. You got these added fees, you got to explain this and that, and sometimes you might forgot something you thought it had on auto pay, but it wasn't on auto pay. And they just have to be patient and work with the customer. But they're not talking to Stanky, who makes the bills and who makes the rates and stuff like that, or whoever the regional person. Same thing as a grocery store. You know what I'm saying? That clerk you check out with. You know what I'm saying? You're not talking to
And we should never undersell and underestimate the public.
Yeah.
And one of the stories that I like to tell, in 2004, we were undergoing really difficult negotiations here in Arizona, but they were already on strike in Southern California. Our contracts had expired at the same time in October of 2003. And at that time, in Southern California, the unions had taken a strike vote, and they voted to strike Vons, which is owned by Safeway. And the three national grocery chains, borderline collusion, I think it was collusion, they agreed. And this is Albertsons at the time. Albertsons, Safeway, which owns Vons in Southern California, and Kroger's, which owned Ralph's in Southern California. They agreed that if either one of those companies were struck, the other two companies would lock their employees out. So when the unions took a strike vote at Vons only, and they voted to strike Vons stores, Ralph's and Albertsons locked their employees out. And this was for 4.5 months. So they colluded with their competitors to lock out their own employees to honor the one company that was struck.
Yeah.
And so at that time, in the Inland Empire, there were terrible wildfires. People were being evacuated. People were losing their homes. And the union decided then that we, in good conscience, cannot force these people at the most vulnerable times in their life to have to make a decision whether or not to cross a picket line to get the essential things that they needed to take care of themselves and their families.
Yeah.
So they removed the picket lines from all of those stores that were affected by the wildfires. And you know, the majority of the public still honored the strike and the lockout,
Wow.
the locked out workers, and refused to shop in those stores, even though there was no picket line in front of the store.
That's,
And they went to other stores.
man,
That's
So-
a beautiful thing.
We should never underestimate the support of the public as experiencing right now at 71% popularity. We should never underestimate or undersell or take for granted the general public. And at that time, it was a huge support, even though that strike and that lockout lasted 4.5 months. The public were supporting those workers. So we should always remember that, and again, never take the public for granted, and don't undersell them either.
that's really reassuring. I mean, because sometimes, and maybe Ryan and Rashawn, you're able to relate, Fred as well. You know, I spent time a couple 3 years as a labor representative, and sometimes you get a little bit jaded, right? Like I don't know if I want you guys to agree with me, but like there's a there to me, the biggest fear is apathy, right? When you go up to somebody and you tell them this is why you should care, and then they don't, right? Or they still do what you hope they wouldn't. So hearing stories of, right, like pickets being honored even though there's a tragic situation going on, and they can within their means still go somewhere else, and they make that choice consciously, that's really reassuring to, like, you know, somebody who you know, sometimes you know, you're going out there and you strike out at like recruiting, right? When you go to sign up members to the union, sometimes you just bat 0 for 5, you know, you get the golden sombrero, and like it's tough out there sometimes.
Is that what that's called?
Yeah, the golden sombrero.
I've had a few of them.
I mean, yeah, I'm like really disheartened, disappointed. If I got a new hire and I can't get everybody, I'm hurt a little bit, because like first, like, why would you not want to do this? It's like the greatest thing ever, like to have, you know, empowerment. I look at it, bottom line is empowerment. It empower you as an employee to have a voice at your job. Why would you not want to have a voice in your pay, your days off, how things are ran, how you're treated, you know, your safety? Why would you not want to have a say? And you cannot put a price tag on having a say at your job. Like, I understand the deal breaker. First thing, how much the dues? Hey, if we're talking about how much the dues and you can afford, I mean, we have a bigger issue to address in the contract, if that's the problem. But why not? I always tell, look at investing into yourself. And you know, at the end of the day, why not do that? Empower yourself. Like, nobody had, not too many people had the opportunity to empower themselves.
I remember negotiating a new contract for school employees in a school district where the raise was going to be 10.4% for the year. And you know, sometimes we were lucky to get 8 over 3 years, but this time we were getting 10% in 1 year. And a couple months passed, and I go to sign up members at a new orientation, at a new employee orientation. And the question is, right, you know, what are the dues? What's it going to cost me out of pocket to be a member of the union? And I'm always upfront, right? I'm saying, you know, hey, you're a school bus driver. An incoming school bus driver will usually pay, let's say, $43 a month in union dues, right? And so then they, you know, you get, sometimes people just take it as information, and they'll sign up and they'll go about their day. But a lot of times you get the raised eyebrow. It's like, so I'm paying $43 just giving it away. And the next thing to come out of my mouth is, no, that money doesn't disappear. That money becomes your raise. That money becomes your paid holidays. That money becomes your negotiating team. That money becomes each benefit that you get year after year.
Arbitration.
And you said it, and I think you might have just taken the words out of my mouth, because I've said it multiple times in new employee orientations. If the money you pay for dues hurts, then something's wrong. Because the money you pay for your dues, like out of that 10% raise, is 10x times what that raise was, right? So a school bus driver, let's say was making, oh God, I really hope I'm giving a realistic figure here. It's school bus driver in 1 year was going to make $74,000. And so out of that year, maybe they pay $240 in dues that 1 year. That 10% raise is thousands of dollars. So your dues are minuscule in comparison to what the union got you in just a raise that year.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
How much you say the school bus driver makes again?
This is why I was joking that I was hoping I was giving a realistic number. 74,000 a year.
In what state?
California.
Come on, Fred. I'm just playing.
Okay.
No, he said California cost of living is high.
We should be looking at a reduction across the board.
That's a blooper reel right there.
Oh man.
No, but you hit on the word apathy, and like, I'm not preaching voter apathy, and I know that our organization does a lot to combat that, and we have the rates to prove that union members vote at a higher, propensity than the rest of the public, right? But that apathy is something that we know it exists, and it exists uniquely in younger generations.
Yes.
But when you can see the material benefit of this is what it means to pay in and be a part of your union and have a voice in your workplace, and go, oh, this is why I have a contract. This is why I have protections. This is why I have, protective gear, like after COVID and during COVID, right? Or when we see Roe v. Wade get stripped, and this is why I have reproductive care in my contract, which is now negotiated, because we're always learning and growing the things that we bring to the bargaining table. If that's not an apathy killer, I don't know what is,
Yeah.
Not saying our job is easy, but that's an easy sell, right?
I work with AFL-CIO. I don't know a lot of the affiliate, but like I've been working with AFL-CIO a lot, and one of the things they changed that contract was, how the number of times you get new boots, because if you work in some of these places, 6 months you can run through your boots in 6 months.
Twice.
And at one time, couple of them, then you get boots one time per year. When I used to work in the steel mill, and I only get boots one time a year. I'm like, I'm working around steel, and I sometimes jump in a pit full of shards of steel. Them boots get ate up, especially when you got oil and all the chemicals and stuff. So one time a year, you end up paying out of pocket just to have good safety boots. And that's the type of thing, like, somebody had to say, you know what, that doesn't make any sense. Dudes PM ever realize it, and you shoot up the chain of command, and boom, it's part of negotiation. Now they get boots twice a year, which makes sense.
Hell yeah.
Because even if you're a runner, you have to change out of shoes every 3-6 months. So what's the difference between someone who work every day? Those are the things that's important. And like, it's not about pay, it's about safety and stuff like that. And that's what's the power of being a union. It's because you get to make a decision. If you see something wrong, and you can eloquently say, this is wrong, and this is the best way to change it. And then you get all your union siblings together and y'all vote. That's power.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when an issue can go from the floor of the worksite to the negotiating committee to the bargaining table to corporate ratification, that's one of the many faces of union power, right? There's the conversation we just had about fighting apathy, and there's folks out there who within their right want to go to work, they want to go home, they want to live their lives, but I want to use this analogy, which is, not everybody can do it, right? But like, you spend what, a quarter of your life asleep, so you should invest in a good mattress, because you're going to spend most of, like, a good chunk of your life there. When you get a job, invest in a union, and that goes beyond just your dues. It goes into what you suggest. Hey, my boots are wearing out faster than we get them, so let's get 2 boots a year. My pay is not keeping up with inflation, so let's bargain above inflation each year. We're not properly staffed. Let's bargain with corporate or with employment on trying to staff properly, if not to, like, at least rectify schedules to make them reasonable, right? So I don't know if you guys are comfortable with that, but like, comparing a union to a good mattress is, you gotta invest on it. Invest on it.
I've heard maybe worse comparisons.
Is a good union like a Tempur-Pedic, or like
Yeah, but I want to suggest also, though, in regards to apathy, that I don't feel like it's all apathy.
Okay.
That there's a lot of responsibility that we have as union leaders to make sure that we're educating workers about the value of a union, the purpose of a union, and to a certain extent, the history of labor and why it's important for workers. And then if we're effective in doing that, then that creates that'll help grow our membership, no matter what union you belong to. And I don't really always feel comfortable saying this is a mixed company, and I know this is going out to the public. But at the same time, that we do have to understand as unions that in a right to work state, there's a certain amount of customer service that takes place with unions. And so if you are a union in a secure state, a secure shop, then it is even more important that you're taking care of the members, servicing the members, that the members see you, that the members understand what it is that you're doing. And that goes a long ways towards combating and eliminating a certain amount of apathy that exists.
It does, yeah.
And unions and workers that potentially should and could be union members. Because even in California, where they have 30 days to join a union in a secure state environment, there are certain members, certain workers that will avoid the union rep for months, and management will not report them, will not take them off the schedule, and they get away with it. They freeload for a while, and so I think that educational process, the fact that you have a presence and that you're out there servicing, because we already know as union representatives, as organizers, if it's human nature, if they don't see you, they're going to assume the worst.
Yeah.
And so we have to be visible. We have to be present. And not only that, we have to be doing our jobs.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards.
I just want to correct myself from earlier. The Detroit Red Wings, right?
Yes.
Sorry, the colors. My bad.
Town USA. Yeah.
I just want to correct it. It's a red wing. I said it fly up, man. Red wing. I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. Red wing.
You're like sweating about it. It's like,
It's the red
All of my heart goes out to my heart rates,
Which is another hardworking town, Philly. So anybody from Philly, shout out to Philly. Sweet.
I love Philadelphia.
Well, all right then. Thank you, Fred, for being our inaugural guest.
Thank you for having me.
I look forward to the conversations that we're gonna have in this podcast. I mean, if Fred is an indication of the history and the power of the movement, then I can't wait till we, secure some future guests. I wonder, who it could be. But thank you, Ryan, for coming up from Tucson. And thank you, Rashawn, for taking time off your day. I mean, both of you as organizers, I know you're out there like front lines. So when it comes to labor, I don't think organizers are anything but the front lines. So thank you from me as the training specialist in the state. I look forward to future episodes, and thank you again.
All right, thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
this is great.
I'm just saying,
Reading Rainbow,